Hey guys, welcome to a SAPP coding tutorial.
And today we're going to be learning about ArrayLists in Java. So, ArrayLists in Java, let's talk about them. Okay, so what are ArrayLists? ArrayLists are data structures, which are essentially structures in code that can store data, pretty self-explanatory. And they're basically data structures which can be used to store any kind of data. So any kind of data type you can think of, integers, double strings, even your own data types that you make. So for example, if you make like a book class, you can make an array list of book objects. Or if you make like a student class, you can make student object array list of student objects, etc., etc. And then you should know that once you specify your data type, it gets locked in, as in you can't actually change it. So if you initialize an array list and tell it that it needs to hold integers, it can only hold integers from that point on. So the indexing system, what is it? So if you've learned about arrays before, which you probably should have, then you'll know that the array list, or at least then you'll be happy to know that the array list follows the same system using indexes to organize and manage its data. So when you add an element or an index, when you add or index some kind of value into the array list, it becomes known as an element. And then these elements are then assigned an index value in the order in which they were indexed. Okay, so how do you use an array list? So you learned A, that array lists are data structures that can hold many values, an infinitely large amount of values to be exact. And point B is that you learned that they use an indexing system to manage and store their data. Whenever you're learning about data structures, that's like the main thing that you need to learn about. You need to know how they store their value, because the indexing system is handy, but there are a ton of other data structures out there, and they all use different methods of storing data and organizing them. Okay, so let's learn how do you use it. So they come with a lot of methods, and they say they have a lot of operations and a lot of methods that you can use to manage the data inside the array list. For example, looking at this Javadoc website, which is Oracle's kind of a you can think of it like an ArrayList dictionary. Not even just ArrayList. You can actually come here and look at any Java aspect in Java. As long as you can code it, chances are it's in here. So as you can see, there's a ton of different methods in here, like absolutely a ton. Like there are a lot, but we're only going to be talking about 4 out of all these. The add method, this one, we're going to be talking about the get method, the remove method here, and the set method, set method here. And then we're also going to be mentioning the size method, but that's for a little bit later. Okay, so let's look at the main operations. The first thing that we've got is the add method. Basically, for the add method, you feed in a value, whichever data type you've assigned to the array list. You feed in a value of that data type, and then it just appends it or adds it into the array list. That's pretty self-explanatory. And it returns a Boolean value. It returns whether or not the object was successfully added or not. So true if it was added, false if it wasn't added. The get method is also pretty self-explanatory. Actually, these all are. But the get method, basically, you give it an index, and it'll basically go to that index in the array list, and it'll retrieve that value. So, for example, if using that example from earlier, if we added a 5 into the array list, and it's the first element we added, saying get 0 will return 5, because that's the index assigned to it. And same thing, if you have like a bunch of other elements and you specify an index, then you're going to get that value assigned to that index. But if you pass in an invalid index, as in one that is larger, or one that doesn't exist inside the array list, so if the maximum of index is like 5 and you say 9, then you're going to get an error, and the program will forcibly come to an end. The remove method is pretty simple. You feed in another index, but it'll go, this time though, it'll go to that index, and it'll just delete it from the array list. And so every element from that point on will just scooch down 1. So for example, if you remove 7 and that was at index 3, anything at, let's say, and then the next value was like 8 at index 4. So the 7 at index 3 is going to go, and the 8 from index 4 is going to move down to 8 at index 3. So that's like the only exception. That's the only time when indexes are really shuffled around. That's when it's really when things are removed and stuff. Okay, and then after that, it returns the object that you remove. So in the earlier case, if you remove the 7 will get returned as an integer. Finally, the set method is the last one we're going to be talking about today, except for the size method. So the set method, you have to feed in 2 pieces of information. 1, the index number that you'll be accessing, and 2, the value that you're going to be injecting. Whoopsies. So basically, here's what you do. So after you call this method, it'll go to index, so the number you specify in the array list. It'll replace the value there with this value that you specify here, and then it'll return the value that you just replaced as a return value. Okay, so now that we've talked about kind of what we're doing here, how ArrayLists really work and stuff, let's not talk, actually, let's code. So let's go write some code. So open up your IDE or whatever. I'm going to be using Eclipse for this one. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a new Java project. And I'm just going to name this, we're going to go name this Java things. Yeah. And this is kind of where I'm just going to be doing all my tutorial stuff. I actually had another folder, and I had a bunch of stuff in there, but yeah. I'm just going to name this data structures. So if you don't know what I'm doing, I'm creating a folder, basically. That's what a package is. And there is a naming convention for them. I'm not really using them right now, though. I'm just kind of naming it whatever. Okay, and then for the Java class, let's go ahead and name it ArrayList tut. And also, it's a really bad idea to name your classes after things like actual classes that already exist, because then you're going to get errors when you try to use that class. So if I named this ArrayList and I tried to use an ArrayList in here, I would get errors. Okay, so first steps first, let's go ahead and make a main method. So public static void main string array of arguments. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually make an array list to use. So before we actually make an array list, let's go ahead and talk about the different things that you can use. So anytime you want to initialize an array list, you're going to need to decide what kind of data type you're using, and that data type has to be a wrapper type. So for example, if you want to use an int, you can't because it's a primitive type. Instead, you have to use its wrapper form known as integer. Integer, not integer. Next up, if you want to use a double, just use its wrapper form, capital D double. So on and so forth. Pretty much this is it's all the same. Like it kind of follows a pattern here. Like just take the first letter and make it capital, or if it's like int, turn it into an integer, or if it's char, turn it into character, so on and so forth. So basically just use the wrapper types. And if you're using your own custom class or something like string or something, then you're free to just use it as is because it already starts with the capital letter. It's already an object. That's kind of what we're going for here. So it's a class, so type in ArrayList, and we're going to be creating an ArrayList object. Let's go ahead and import that. Okay. So let's go ahead and create the ArrayList. Let's go ahead and make this one a string one, and we're going to set it. We're going to call this ArrayList, and then let's set that equal to new ArrayList. Let's add these and let's add these. So I kind of ran over it real quick. I didn't really mention it. But whenever you're specifying the type that you want to use, you want to have this greater than less than thing. They're called like diamonds, generics. They go by many names. I call them angular brackets because they're kind of angles. I don't know, but basically, just know that you're supposed to specify your data type in here. If I wanted to do numbers, then I could say integer. If I wanted to do string, I can do string. I already did string. If I wanted to do character, I can do character. But I'm going to stick with string for now. So if I want to add values to the array list, I just have to do ArrayList.add, and I just have to specify the value that I want to add. So let's say I want to add SAPP. SAPP is added. There's you can add the same value over and over again. That part doesn't really matter. There's no rule saying that you can't have the same value. It's just that these two will have different indexes. This will be stored under index 0. This one will be stored under index 1. So that's important to know. You can also add you can also add like appended strings. So let's say I want to do SAPP is. I can add a string here, and I can say pretty cool, right? If I wanted to, I could add that. Or if I wanted to, I could actually add a number here, and that would be a part of the appended string as well. So it'd be SAPP is 2. I'm going to keep that actually. And then finally, well, not finally, but that's about it. So getting methods is also pretty easy. To display getting methods, I'm just going to go ahead and let's print something real quick. Let's go ahead and say, you just have to say ArrayList.get, and it'll return the value. Let's say get 1 or get 2. Getting 2 is going to return this one right here because we have 0. This is under index 0. This is under index 1. And this is under index 2. So let's go ahead and get 2. We'll print that out. Let's actually add some string. Let's actually add a string value here. Let's say value at index 2 is there. So let's go ahead and run this. So we're going to go right-click Run As and Java Application. Down here, we're going to get our terminal window open, and it's going to say value at index 2 is SAPP. Or SAPP is 2. So that's pretty neat. You can even remove values. So as a quick test, what we're going to do is we're going to print out the array list. And the way you can print out an array list is pretty simple. All you need to do is type in the word array list or the name of your array list. Mine happens to be array list. As you can see, these two match. They're highlighted. So I'm going to print it out, and doing that's just going to print out every value in a nice little box format. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to print everything out like that. So I'm going to print it out. Let's go ahead and print out the value that we're going to remove. So the way we do that is ArrayList.remove. Then we can specify our index. I'm going to go ahead and remove the value at index 1. So SAPP here, the second SAPP. And then let's go ahead and we're going to use shortcuts this out and control space. And then we can print out the array list once again. Remember, if you surround array list in double quotes, then it'll just print out the word array list. That's not what we're looking for here. If we just type in the word array list, it'll print that normally. So as you can see, the first time we print it, we get SAPP, SAPP, and SAPP is 2. Then we get SAPP printed out because we remove it. And then we get SAPP, and SAPP is 2. Okay, so let's do that whole thing. But now let's go ahead and add another action. So let's go ahead and add the action. Let's go ahead and set a value. So let's go ahead and say ArrayList.set. And we're going to go ahead and set the value at index 2 to howdy. And it's going to print out SAPP is 2. And then we're going to print out the array list one more time. So as you can see, here's actually something cool that happened. So as you can see, I got an error here. And the reason because of that is because I added 2. And you might be thinking, why is that? We have this 2 right here, right? But if you've been paying attention, then you would have noticed that since we removed one of them, there's only 2 elements in here, so the indexes are 0 and 1. So technically this is illegal. So we have to write 1 here. That actually slipped me. I don't know how that slipped me, but it did. But that's actually pretty good. That was a pretty good instructional lesson. And that's how errors look like, by the way. They'll be red and it's kind of scary for beginners. They were to me, at least. So as you can see, we have the fully printed out array list. Then we have SAPP, because we removed it. Then we have SAPP, and SAPP is 2. Then we have SAPP is 2, because we replaced it. And now we have SAPP and howdy. So that was kind of a quick lesson on ArrayList. And actually, one last thing before we go. I'm going to go ahead and print out the size of the array list. We're just going to say size of a list. And then outside, we're going to add a plus sign to append something to the string or add it onto the string. And we're going to type in ArrayList.size. And the size method will just return the number of elements inside of the array list. So let's go ahead and let's run this again. As you can see, the first time around we get SAPP is 2. SAPP gets returned. Then we have SAPP is 2. Then SAPP is 2 is kicked out. Then we have SAPP and howdy. And the end result is that there are 2 items in the list. So that kind of wraps up array lists. They're pretty easy to use, and they have a lot of practical uses. However, the thing is, I feel like, personally, that in order to really understand array lists, you kind of need to just use them. So in order to really learn the value of data structures, array lists namely, then you should just mess around with them. Try different scenarios, try using them as much as you can, anytime you can, and then you'll come to learn for yourself. But that's kind of how you use array lists. And then if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. And if you felt like we didn't explain a part correctly, or if you felt that you had trouble understanding a part, then leave a comment down below. We'll be sure to get to it as soon as possible. And if you didn't like it for some reason, go ahead and leave a dislike. But then also, please tell us why you disliked it, just because, helps us too. So, thanks, and I will see you guys in the next episode.